The first time I saw Elvis Presley, it wasn't on a stage under bright lights. It was in a dark, stuffy hotel room, and he was soaked in sweat, having a nightmare so bad it made my heart ache. I'll never forget the way he looked, lying there on the bed, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps. His eyes were wide open, but he wasn't seeing me. He was somewhere else, somewhere dark and scary. I had just walked into the room, my feet blistered and sore from a long, hot walk through the streets of New Orleans. My friend Pat and I had gotten separated from the group after Elvis's show, and we ended up walking for what felt like forever to get back to the hotel. When we finally made it, we were exhausted, and the last thing I expected was to find Elvis in such a state. "Elvis, it's me, June," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I moved closer to him, and he started to calm down a little. His breathing slowed, but he was still sweating, and his heart was pounding so hard I could see it through his shirt. I ran to the bathroom and wet a face cloth, then gently placed it on his forehead. "Take a deep breath, Elvis," I said, just like I had seen our PE teacher do for a girl who was hyperventilating once. "Breathe in and let it out slow." He started to relax, and after a few minutes, he opened his eyes. They were still scared, but he managed a weak smile. "Thanks, baby," he said, his voice hoarse. I don't know what that was about. I sat down on the edge of the bed, and he reached out for my hand. "You were dreaming about something bad," I said, trying to sound reassuring, "but you're okay now." He nodded, but I could tell he was still shaken. "I saw myself in a coffin," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My mom was there crying. It was too much, June. I don't even want to think about it." I didn't know what to say, so I just held his hand and rubbed my thumb over his knuckles. "You're here now, and you're safe," I said. "That's all that matters." Elvis took a deep breath and closed his eyes, and for a moment, it was like he was a little boy again, needing comfort. I leaned over and kissed his forehead, and he smiled, even though it was a small one. "I'm glad you're here, June," he said. "You always know how to make things better." It was a strange night, and it wasn't the first time I had seen Elvis in a vulnerable moment. But it was the first time I realized just how much pressure he was under. The fame, the crowds, the constant attention, it was all taking a toll on him. And in that moment, I knew I wanted to be there for him, no matter what. But the next day, when the reality of the tour hit me, I wasn't so sure. The long, exhausting days, the sleepless nights, the constant movement from one city to another, it was all catching up with me too. I was ready to go home to my own bed, to a life that wasn't so chaotic. But as I packed my bags and said goodbye to Elvis, I couldn't help but feel a little torn. I wanted to be with him, but I also wanted a break from the madness. Elvis promised to call me every day, and he did. But as the days turned into weeks, and his calls became less frequent, I started to wonder if maybe I had made the right choice. Maybe I wasn't cut out for the life of a star, and maybe I was better off back in Biloxi, where things were simpler. But that all changed on the afternoon of August 21st, 1956. A young man from Western Union knocked on my door, holding a telegram. When I opened it, my hands were shaking, and I could hardly believe my eyes. It was from Elvis, and it was the most romantic thing he had ever done for me. Elvis called me a few days later, his voice different from the last time. He sounded a bit sad, and I could tell something was bothering him. "June, they're making changes to the movie," he said. "I'm gonna sing a song in it now." I was surprised. "But there was no singing in the script. What made them change it?" "I don't know, baby. I don't know. It's okay, though. It's a pretty good song." "Whose idea was this?" I asked, trying to understand. "I don't know, baby. It just sorta happened. It's a love song. Its original title was Aura Lee, but they changed it to Love Me Tender. He wanted me to like it, so he sang it to me over the phone, a cappella." "Oh wow, that's not a pretty good song. It's a beautiful song," I said, trying to cheer him up. "You really think so, baby?" "Yes, Elvis, I really think so. It's a beautiful song." "They're planning to make it the theme song for the movie. I had no objections at first. I was supposed to record the song and have it playing in the beginning. Then they were going to have the instrumental version play throughout the movie. All this was okay with me. But now they've changed my character from a farm boy to a singing farm boy. Oh, and they've also changed the name of the movie. It's no longer the Reno Brothers. It's now called Love Me Tender, like the song. I could hear the disappointment in his voice. Do one thing for me, Elvis. Let them change anything they want, but please don't let them change you, okay? Don't worry, baby, like the song says, for my darling, I love you and I always will. I miss you so much, baby. As soon as I finish up here, I'm going home, and I want you to come home with me, okay? As soon as you finish, just let me know and I'll be there. I miss you too, Elvis. Don't worry about the movie. I'm sure everything will work out. Just get it finished so we can be together. I've got to run, baby. Someone's at the door, and I've got a feeling it's the management asking me to get the boys under control. I've rented the entire floor of the hotel and flew the gang out here to keep me company. Sometimes they get a little rambunctious. I don't have to tell you, June. You know how they cut up whenever they're bored. Let me run, baby. I'll talk to you soon. I said a quick goodbye and I love you, and listened for the dial tone. In the early days of shooting, Elvis's movie had a lot of changes. Producers, directors, and especially Colonel Tom Parker were always calling meetings to discuss the script. It was during these meetings that Elvis had extra time on his hands. He would call me on the nearest phone, and our conversations would last from 5 to 15 minutes. He always started these daytime calls with, "It's me, baby." The Colonel called another meeting. I was now working at home, making costumes for Mardi Gras, and could be found any time, night or day, close to the phone. Not that I had many other plans. I was known as Elvis Presley's girlfriend, and all my former dates were busy elsewhere. I did get a few date invitations while Elvis was in Hollywood, though. The director of entertainment at Keesler AFB called and asked if I would accompany singer Mel Torme to a formal dinner. I politely declined, saying I was busy. A few weeks later, the same guy called again, this time wanting to fix me up with a juggling comedian who was taller and better looking than Mel Torme. I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke, but I realized he was serious. It made me angry, and for the next few weeks, the ringing of the phone put me on edge. The quick daytime calls from Elvis stopped after a week. I guess the Colonel had finally had his say, and sorted everything out. I enjoyed hearing from Elvis at any hour, but it was the nighttime calls I looked forward to the most. His voice was softer, more romantic, when he was alone in his room and ready for bed. I hadn't been out of the house in over a week, so it didn't take much for Pat to convince me to go to a movie one night. When I got home, the phone was ringing as I was unlocking the door. By the time I reached it, it had stopped. 20 minutes later, it rang again. "Where have you been, baby? I was getting worried," Elvis said, sounding relieved to hear my voice. "Nowhere. I've been in this house so long I feel like a piece of furniture," I answered, not really thinking it was a lie. "You should get out and do things, baby. Staying home all the time is not healthy. If I'm cooped up too long, I go crazy." He laughed, letting me know he wasn't staying in much either. "I can't wait to see you, June. Sometimes at night when I have trouble falling asleep, I close my eyes and I can see your face. But then your face changes, and it's not your face anymore. I get so aggravated I open my eyes and close them again, trying to start over. Sometimes it works, but then you quickly fade away. Dreaming about you is better. At least you stay with me longer. The only trouble is, I don't dream about you enough. If I could only push a button and select my dreams, they'd all be about you. I've had a few dreams about you too, Elvis, but they're always crazy and in slow motion. The last time I dreamed of you, there was this man with a cigar holding me back. It was so real, I could smell the stench of cigar on his breath. You're kidding," he laughed. "No, I'm not kidding, Elvis, it was awful. That was probably Colonel Parker, June." "Oh shit, I'd forgotten all about him. Don't tell me the old coot is going to plague me even in my dreams. When you see him again, tell him not to breathe in my face, okay?" He burst out laughing, making me laugh with him. "That's the one thing about you I miss the most. I don't get a chance to laugh out here. It's all make-believe, nobody is real. I can't wait to finish this movie so I can get the hell out of here. I want to go home, baby. I want to be with you. How much longer before you're finished?" "I don't know, baby. We're just getting started good. Hey, I've got a great idea. Why don't you come out here?" "I wish I could," I replied, not really wanting to. "Why can't you, June? Give me one good reason." "I wouldn't fit in with all those people, Elvis." "Yes, you would, June. You'd fit in anywhere. You could even take a screen test, baby. You could be a movie star. You're prettier than any girl out here, I swear." "Oh yes, I'm sure. You're only saying that 'cause it's true." "No, it is true, June. Everybody would love you, especially these big shots out here. They'd take one look at you and sign you up. I'm serious, baby. Thanks, my love. But I have no desire to become a movie star. A few years earlier, I had thought about becoming a costume designer. But that was it. I never mentioned this to Elvis, and I didn't now. I'm sure he would have insisted I come out and give it a try. Well, you could come out here and be my movie star, June. Did you forget about the Colonel? I'm sure he'd love me to show up in Hollywood. He wouldn't have to know, baby. We could keep it a secret. Be serious, Elvis. Besides, I hate all that secret stuff. Anyway, the whole world would know as soon as I stepped off the plane. How do you think I know so much about what's going on with you? 'Cause I tell you everything, that's how. That's a crock and you know it. Every day I read something different about you. You can't even blow your nose without it being in the news. Is it all good stuff? Well, so far so good. I haven't read anything about any other girls yet. What do you mean, yet? There are no other girls, June. You're the only girl in my life. Besides, I wouldn't have time for a girl even if there was one. Then how would you have time for me? I'd make time for you, baby. I'm not happy being this far from you. Do you realize there's 3,000 miles between us? That's a lot of miles, baby. Makes me tired just thinking about it. I'm so tired right now, I could sleep for a week. He yawned. Why don't you tell me good night? Hang up the phone and get a good night's sleep. I can't. I haven't had anything to eat yet. I'm waiting on room service, and if they don't come soon, it's gonna be too late. The night was filled with dreams of Elvis. I rode a bicycle for miles, asking everyone how far it was to California. Each time, the answer was the same, 3,000 miles. It was a strange, endless journey. A few days later, Elvis called, and I told him about my dream. He laughed, saying he had a dream too, but in his, he was jumping over tall buildings like Superman. I never made it to Biloxi, he joked. His calls started coming every other day, usually with an apology for missing the day before. I didn't get to call last night, baby. We had a late day on the set, and by the time I got back to the Beverly, I was so beat I fell asleep before I even had a chance to eat, he explained. His schedule was grueling, starting at 5 a.m., and he was always exhausted. One night, he fell asleep on the phone. I could hear the music in the background and his slow, steady breathing. I called his name and even whistled, but nothing worked. I didn't want to hang up and leave the line open, so I kept talking. Finally, I heard a little groan. Hello, hello, can you hear me, Elvis? Are you awake? Don't go back to sleep, talk to me, I shouted. Is that you, June? Why are you yelling at me? He asked, still groggy. You fell asleep, my love. Say good night and hang up the phone. I'll talk to you tomorrow. June, I thought I was dreaming. I could hear your voice, but I couldn't find you. Where are you, baby? I'm right here, Elvis, talking to you on the phone. Now hang up the phone like a good boy and go to sleep. I heard him trying to put the phone back in the cradle, and then the dial tone. It was 11 p.m. my time, but only 9 p.m. in California, and he was already fast asleep. Biloxi was growing fast. The telephone company had to add a prefix to our 4-digit number. When Elvis called during the changeover, the operator gave him a hard time. He was really frustrated by the time the call went through. When did you get the prefix, June? He asked, still sounding angry. Is that you, Elvis? What's going on? A prefix, baby, a prefix on your phone number, he replied loudly. Oh, that? We just got it a few days ago. I didn't know it was called a prefix. I thought it was called an exchange. Damn, I've been on the phone with a Biloxi operator for at least 20 minutes. I felt like telling her to kiss my ass, but I figured if I wanted to talk to you anytime soon, I'd better play her little game. She probably knew it was you, Elvis. I didn't tell the bitch my name, June. You didn't have to. She knew you were calling me, and she knew you were calling from Hollywood, and she probably recognized your sexy voice. Did you write the new number down? Yeah, I got it safely tucked away in my little black book. I wouldn't want to go through that shit again. Guess what, baby? The end is finally in sight. We're heading for a wrap. It won't be long now. Oh, that reminds me, what did the monkey say when the train cut off his tail? I give up, Elvis. What did he say? It won't be long now, he laughed. Ain't that a cute joke, baby? I heard it today on the set. This guy was running around saying, it won't be long now, it won't be long now, and Richard Egan said he sounded like that damn monkey. I said, what monkey is that, Mr. Egan? And he said, the monkey that was sitting on the railroad track. We were shooting a serious scene, and every time I thought about that silly joke I got tickled. They were yelling, "Cut, cut, let's take it again all afternoon. It was funny, baby, today was a good day." It's good to hear you laugh, Elvis. I can't help it, baby. I'm excited about going home. I'm excited too, Elvis. I miss you. I miss you too, baby. And just think it won't be long now. He asked me to call the airport and check the price of tickets to Memphis, and suggested I bring along Pat. We laughed and talked for over an hour. He was so tired he had a real case of the sillies. I wasn't even tired, but I had them too. Every time he called, his mood became my mood. If he was down about something, I would be down for days after. I didn't realize his phone calls were affecting me until my mother brought it to my attention. "June, your bottom lip is dragging along the floor." If Elvis knew he had this kind of effect on you, he wouldn't call you at all. The next time he calls, I want to have a talk with him. "I'll be okay, Mama. It's just that I hate it when he's upset and I can't do anything to help." Elvis is a grown man, June. He can take care of himself. I won't let it bother me any more, I promise. I kept my promise by not letting my mother see me, unless I had a smile on my face. To me, Elvis wasn't a grown man. He was a little boy who needed me. He was trying to absorb as much as possible about a new profession, and I knew he'd be fine as soon as he got away from the pressures of Hollywood. After he invited me and Pat to visit, I dialed 411 for information. Several calls later, I had the price of a round-trip ticket to Memphis. I called Pat and invited her to join me for an all-expense, paid vacation with Elvis. "When do we leave? When do we leave?" she screamed. "As soon as he's finished with his movie. Probably a week or so, I'm not sure." While she was screaming to everyone in her house, I multiplied the ticket price by 2 and wrote down all the information, including the flight schedule, on a scratch pad next to the phone. Back then, air travel wasn't the most popular mode of transportation, especially from the tiny airport in Gulfport, Mississippi. Flights to Memphis were available 4 days a week, 1 flight per day. Pat and I spent the next few days shopping for new outfits, down to the shoes for the plane. People back then used to get all dressed up for a flight. It was considered a special occasion. I was expecting Elvis to call from Hollywood any day, telling me he was on his way home. So I was completely taken by surprise when the voice on the other end of the phone said, "Little Satnin, this is your lovey. I have a sleepy little boy here wanting to speak to you." Without waiting for a reply, Elvis's mother handed the phone to him. His sleepy voice told me he was recuperating from his long train ride, had slept 12 hours straight, and was well rested and happy to be home. He didn't waste any time on the phone, saying he was grabbing a bite to eat and heading out to the Western Union office to wire the money for our airline tickets. "As soon as the money arrives, call and make your flight reservations. Can you come tomorrow? Can you get packed and ready that fast?" "Are you kidding? I've been packed and ready for 3 days now." "Good. I can't wait to see you, baby. Mama said to bring a sweater. It's a little cooler up here than in Biloxi. I love you, baby. I'll see you in a little bit." Pat was at my house when the call came, and we decided to go to the Western Union office to wait for the money. When we got there, I noticed the same young man who had delivered my love telegram standing behind the counter. "What brings you here, Whittle Bitty?" he asked, remembering the nickname Elvis had given me. I told him we were having money wired to us, and thought we would wait there instead of hanging around the house. "Elvis is sending us money, we're flying to Memphis," Pat shouted with excitement. We took a seat on the long wooden bench across from the counter and waited, and waited, and waited. "Are you sure he was sending it today?" Pat asked after 2 hours had gone by. That's what he said. Our rear ends were numb from sitting on the hard bench, so we informed the attendant that we could be found next door at Klein's Bakery, sitting in a cushioned booth, having cream puffs and coffee. 3 cups of coffee and 2 cream puffs later, we returned to find that the money still hadn't come. We waited another 30 minutes and then called it quits. We had bounced into the office 3 hours earlier, filled with excitement, like a couple of balloons, and now we felt like all our air had been let out. We went back to my house, wondering what had gone wrong. We were there just a few minutes when the phone rang. It was Elvis. "Baby, I ran into a little trouble on my way to Western Union. I didn't get to send the money. I'll send it as soon as I can," he added, sounding out of breath. "Are you okay, Elvis?" Yeah, I'm fine, baby, nothing to worry about. I'll talk to you later, I love you. Before I had a chance to say anything, he hung up the phone. Now I was really confused. First it was excitement, then it was disappointment, and now the caffeine had kicked in. It was Colonel Parker, I thought to myself, trying to place the blame. The Colonel must have stopped Elvis from sending the money. I was pacing through the house, so fidgety I couldn't sit still. That's what it was, I was sure of it. The Colonel was to blame. The disappointment was suddenly replaced by anger. My imagination was running wild. It was not just the Colonel, it was Elvis, too. If he was going to let his cigar-smoking bastard of a manager run his life, then he could count me out. Ranting and raving and pacing like a wild animal. Everything was bastard this and bastard that. Finally, Pat started laughing so hard she couldn't stop. Soon I joined in, and we both started laughing. Why not? We had already been through every emotion we could possibly experience that afternoon. We might as well end it with laughter. Now, I want you to tell me exactly what Elvis had to say to you on the phone just now. Pat said when she'd stopped laughing. He said, baby, I ran into a little trouble on the way to the Western Union, and I didn't get to send the money. I'll send it as soon as I can. Then he said he was fine and would talk to me later. Well, the way I figure let me see Elvis was probably alone at the time, and when he got there, he didn't have any money in his pockets. You know how he is about paying for things. Somebody else always took care of the money 'cause Elvis couldn't be bothered. That's probably all it is, so stop worrying. I collapsed on the couch and started crying. I had run the emotional gamut. When the phone rang again, I made a mad dash for it, thinking it was Elvis again. But this time it was Buddy. He had called Pat's house and heard about our trip to Memphis. Are y'all gonna be home? I'm coming over, he drawled. Sure, come on over. We're not going anywhere, I answered. 20 minutes later, Buddy showed up with 3 bottles of champagne. Well, I heard the news, he sang. This calls for a celebration. The 3 of us proceeded to drink the champagne, 1 bottle at a time, clicking our jelly glasses with a toast after each refill. Other than a slight numbness in my lips and a who cares attitude, I felt relatively normal. It wasn't until I got up from the kitchen table and staggered to the bathroom that I realized I was completely plastered. Checking my reflection in the mirror, I noticed my left eye appeared to be floating to the left. No matter how hard I tried to focus, I couldn't get my left eye to return my gaze. Oh no, I exclaimed, laughing. I look like Junior Smith. Elvis's cousin, Junior, had one eye that always appeared to be looking elsewhere. Maybe it was a birth defect, or maybe it was because Junior was always a little tipsy. Whatever the cause, it was no laughing matter up until then, that is. Look at my eyes. I look like Junior Smith, I exclaimed, returning to the table. Buddy, slamming his hand down over and over on the table, was laughing hysterically, while Pat, holding her stomach, pounded her feet on the floor. The screams of uncontrollable laughter lasted until we were all out of breath. When the laughter subsided, I panicked, realizing my mother was due home in 15 minutes. I didn't dare let her see me in my drunken condition, and suggested we go for a ride. We cleared the table, put the empty bottles in a bag, and placed them in the trunk of Buddy's car. With no particular destination in mind, we piled into the front seat of Buddy's mint green Continental. Feeling a little tipsy himself, Buddy drove us to North Biloxi away from all traffic. We were on a deserted country road when I felt a wave of nausea. Stop the car, I'm gonna be sick, I moaned. Buddy pulled the car as far over as possible on the side of the road. I opened the door, leaned out, and began to barf. The coffee and cream puffs no longer churning in my stomach. I immediately felt better. But then I reached out to close the car door and tumbled head over heels straight into a drainage ditch. Thank God we hadn't had much rain. Pat screamed, "Oh my God," and stepped out to help me. As soon as her foot hit the downward slope of the ground, she came tumbling down too. Too drunk to think about the dangers lurking in the snake-infested ditch, we laughed hysterically while Buddy struggled to get us back in the car. The next day, the phone rang non-stop. People were calling to offer help for my trip to see Elvis. They all wanted to be a part of it, no matter how small. The owner of Rosie's dress shop even called to give me any outfit I wanted, saying she wanted Elvis's girl to look beautiful. Alma, my beautician, wanted to make my short, pixie cut look perfect. I had recently cut off the awful blonde streaks, and it felt like a new beginning. In the afternoon, a friend called to tell me about an article in the Times-Picayune, one of the biggest newspapers in the South. It was about Elvis, but the picture showed a man named Ed Hopper with a massive black eye. The story was about a fight between Elvis and some service station attendants in Memphis. I rushed to the corner drugstore to buy the paper. As I read, the phone rang again. It was Western Union. The money had finally arrived. Pat and I drove to the office, and I showed the clerk the newspaper article, thinking it might explain the delay in the money. He didn't even ask for my ID, remembering me from the wait. "Sign here, please, Miss Juanico," he said with a grin. I signed and pointed out a few funny things to Pat. The sender was Elvis's father, Vernon Presley, not Elvis. "Lovey must have punished my little baby for fighting," I said, laughing. Pat laughed too, and we made our travel reservations for the next day. I called Elvis to let him know everything was set. Pat was jumping up and down, excited about her first flight. I was counting down the minutes until I would see Elvis again. I felt like I could fly without a plane. When we landed in Memphis, I scanned the crowd, but Elvis wasn't there. Mrs. Presley called out to us, "June, Patsy, over here." She and Mr. Presley were waiting for us. We thought it best if Elvis stays out of the public for a while. There are too many people wanting to start trouble, and you know how Elvis can be, Lovey said, noticing my disappointment. Pat and I climbed into the back of the car, and Mrs. Presley looked worried. "Try not to worry, Lovey. Elvis can take care of himself," I said, putting my hand on her shoulder. She squeezed it, close to tears. "Everything's gonna be all right, Lovey," I promised. Mr. Presley got in the car and saw his wife crying. "It's okay, Mama. He's gonna be just fine," he said, patting her leg. "I guess you all heard what happened." Pat tried to lighten the mood by talking about the big black eye in the paper, but Mrs. Presley wasn't amused. We rode in silence for a while. "Did y'all have a good flight?" Lovey asked, regaining her composure. Pat started talking, telling a long story about how the stewardess treated us specially when she found out we were going to see Elvis. She even let us see the cockpit and meet the pilot, who was a big fan too. Pat said she wanted to be a stewardess, and Lovey asked if she'd be afraid. "Oh, no, ma'am, I wouldn't be afraid. I think it would be a fun job," Pat said. When we arrived at the house on Audubon Drive, Elvis was waiting at the gates. He ran to the car, gave me a quick kiss, and led me inside. He introduced me to his friends, then took my hand and we ran to his bedroom. He closed the door and pulled me down on the bed. Realizing I was uncomfortable, he opened the door and we talked for over an hour. "Baby, it's so good to have you here. I've missed you so much. You have to move to Memphis with me. I can't stand being away from you," he said, kissing me all over. "I've missed you too, Elvis. I'm not thinking about going back to Biloxi. I'm right where I want to be," I said, feeling secure next to him, but I was worried about him. "Your mom is worried about you too. She's afraid something bad will happen." "I know, June. I promised her I'd stay out of crowds. That's why I didn't come to the airport. I can't stay home forever, though. Wherever I go, there's always a crowd." "I know, but promise me you'll be careful," I said, feeling a tear roll down my cheek. "I will, baby. Nothing's gonna happen to me. You're the reason I'm gonna live forever," he said, singing, "Is It So Strange," to me. His voice was my comfort. We were having a pillow fight when Lovey joined in with a broom, telling us to stop before someone got hurt. Mr. Presley joined in, laughing and hugging Elvis. Lovey took me aside to help straighten Elvis's bed. "I'm so glad you're here, June. It's good to hear my boy laughing again," she said. "I'm glad I'm here too, Lovey. I haven't been laughing much either. Promise me you'll look after him, June. He'll listen to you. He thinks you're very wise." "I'll do my best, Lovey. Elvis is very lucky to have a loving mother like you." Later that night, we tried to go to a movie. The theater was showing a short film of Elvis performing. Mrs. Presley suggested we use the band's black limo, because it was less recognizable. We got our tickets, and Elvis and Pat went upstairs to a private viewing room. About 20 minutes in, 2 policemen came to get Elvis's car keys. A mob had formed outside and was tearing the car apart. The police moved the limo to a safe place, but the damage was done. Fans were taking pieces of the upholstery as souvenirs. The police came back to move Elvis to a safer place. Pat had a nervous bladder and was in the ladies' room. I couldn't leave her, so the police took Elvis, saying they would wait outside for us. A theater usher helped me find Pat, and we ran to the front of the theater where fans had surrounded the police car. Pat was panicking, but I grabbed her hand, and we pushed our way through the crowd. Someone grabbed Pat by the collar, and her buttons popped. She managed to wiggle out, leaving her blouse behind. We climbed into the back of the police car, and Elvis, sitting between the two policemen, saw Pat with her arms folded across her chest. He started laughing, and one of the policemen gave her his jacket. Shivering, she put it on, and we all started laughing together. The car moved slowly through the crowd, siren blaring and lights flashing. We were finally safe. Elvis, Pat, and I were lucky to have escaped the crowd mostly unscathed. The police thought we were fortunate, considering how big the crowd was. They drove us to the station to pick up the limo. The front windows were smashed, and it looked like someone had taken a knife to the front seat. Pat was relieved to find her coat on the back seat, just where she had left it. She thanked the policeman for his quick response and returned his jacket. When we turned onto Audubon Drive, my first thought was Lovey. This would really scare her. Elvis drove past the house, and we circled the block to get our stories straight. We all agreed that Elvis's mom shouldn't know what happened. Elvis decided to take the limo to his friend Dewey Phillips. Dewey could fix the car and Lovey would never find out. If she asked, we'd say it had broken down. On the way, I asked Elvis about the gas station incident that was in the papers. It all happened really fast, June. After a few punches, we were all taken to jail. They charged us with disorderly conduct and assault. We each had to post a bond of $52. I used your ticket money to pay it. The next day we went to court. Hopper and a guy named Brown were fined $25 for assault, and I was acquitted. It wasn't my fault. I stopped for gas, and some fans blocked the pumps. I got out to get money, and this big guy started pushing me. I hit him, and then the other one joined in. It was all unnecessary, June, it really was. It's all this unnecessary stuff that has your mom worried. Look at this car. Do you really think your fans would do this? I don't think so. I've been around a lot of your fans, and they don't act like this. Maybe the damage was done by someone trying to hurt you. Those guys from the gas station have friends too. Maybe they were trying to get back at you. I hadn't thought about that. One thing's for sure, they got a lot more than $50 worth. Well, it's too late to worry about it now. Dewey will fix the car and Mommy doesn't have to know. Dewey took the car and we went back to Elvis's house. As soon as we walked in, Lovey wanted to know why we were home so early. It's all June's fault, Mama. There was a big crowd at the show and she wouldn't let me get out of the car. Something smells good. What's cookin'? Elvis kissed his mom on the cheek and winked at us. The next morning, the incident made the paper. Elvis's dad got the paper first and showed the article to Elvis, warning him not to let Lovey see it. The paper said Elvis, his date Barbara Hearn, and a girl named Jane went to a theater, and fans mobbed his car, ripping the upholstery and denting the fenders. It took the police 90 minutes to restore order. Elvis teased Pat about her blouse being torn off, and the paper not getting her name right. One good thing, June, they don't know you're here. They thought you were Barbara. That means the colonel won't be on my case about the girl from Biloxi, at least not for a while. He crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash. Lovey called us in for breakfast. Bacon, sausage, eggs, biscuits, and milk gravy were on the table. Lovey asked if I had seen Elvis's little monkey. I started choking and laughing. Lovey's question reminded me of a funny moment from last summer. Who's in there? Elvis had asked, finding the bathroom door locked. Come on, man, I gotta go. Quit spanking your monkey and get out here, he had yelled. I found the phrase funny, even though it was about something I never liked to talk about. No, ma'am, I haven't seen Elvis's little monkey, I managed to say. Lovey patted me on the back, and everyone laughed. She asked if I had seen it, and I said no. She told me it was cute but naughty. After breakfast, Lovey suggested we all go to the back porch. It was actually a glassed-in room, where Elvis kept his little spider monkey, in a custom-made cage. The monkey's big black eyes followed me everywhere. I started talking to it in baby talk, and it suddenly grabbed its long, skinny penis and started masturbating. Pat and I screamed and laughed, and I covered my face. Lovey held me and fussed at Elvis for embarrassing us. "I told you it was cute but naughty," Lovey said, taking me from the room. Elvis laughed and said the monkey found me attractive. That night, Elvis invited Red West to have supper with us. Lovey always made extra because Red ate a lot. Red also asked if I had seen Elvis's little monkey. "Yes, I've seen it, Red. I don't think we should talk about it at the dinner table, do you?" "Yep, you've seen it all right," Red laughed. Later, we went to the amusement park. We were still full from the big supper, so we got on the Ferris wheel for a relaxing ride. Pat yelled down, "Hey June, how would you like some mashed potatoes and gravy?" She pretended she was going to throw up. I was ready for the ride to be over, and so was Elvis after hearing about our last Ferris wheel incident. Elvis showed off his pitching skills and a small crowd gathered to watch. We heard someone heckling Elvis. Elvis told Red to ignore the guy. Red got angry, took off his rings, and handed them to Pat. The heckler saw Red coming and started walking away. Elvis missed his last throw and Pat showed him the rings. "Oh shit, not again." Elvis ran after Red. They were having a heated discussion when Elvis intervened. "Look man, we don't want any trouble. We're just trying to have a good time," Elvis said, trying to calm Red down. We left the park quickly and went back to talk to the guards. They didn't want bad publicity, so the incident was kept quiet. Pat and I were feeling the stress after being in Memphis for less than 2 days. We stayed home for the next few nights, and I was much happier. We passed the time playing pool, throwing darts and listening to music. Elvis started pacing and threw darts into the ceiling. Lovey threatened to use the broom on him if he did it again. I could see Elvis changing, and I felt powerless to help. He would grab my hand and take me to his room, but he always remembered to leave the door ajar out of respect for my wishes. Elvis's mood changed when the Jordanaires arrived to rehearse for the Ed Sullivan Show. He greeted them warmly, and I felt like I had known them forever. They practiced the songs for the show, and then they started singing just for fun. Lovey joined in, and we all sang hymns together. When they sang in the garden, I joined in, and the Jordanaires let me take the alto part. They applauded, and Elvis was beaming with pride. After a 3-hour singing session, the Jordanaires said goodnight. Elvis and I watched them drive away. Back inside, Elvis became restless again. Lovey was making chocolate chip cookies, and I cleaned up the kitchen while Elvis paced. I thought he needed some time alone, but I was worried about what was going on in his head. Elvis's mom called out from the kitchen, "Go tell Elvis the cookies are ready. He likes them hot." She was more worried about Elvis being alone than the cookies. "An idle mind is the devil's workshop," she had said earlier. I went to Elvis's room and found him sitting in bed, reading The Prophet. "Remember this." He smiled, holding up the book. "I love it, June. It helps me relax and forget everything." I climbed into bed, kissed his forehead, and told him the cookies were ready. He jumped up, raced me to the kitchen, and grabbed a few dozen still warm cookies, putting them in a paper bag. He kissed his mom and said we were going for a ride. "It's almost midnight, Elvis," she said, not wanting him to leave. "I know, Mama. The rest of the world is sleeping. It'll be okay." We took the white Eldorado convertible and drove around for an hour, ending up on a deserted mud island. Elvis put the top down and took a deep breath. "Looks like something right out of the movies," he said, looking at the star-filled sky. We sat in silence, enjoying the perfect October night. "It's nights like this that remind me of our good times together," he said, breaking the silence. "The times when my life wasn't so complicated." Elvis's life was getting more hectic. He wasn't happy in Hollywood because he had no control over what was going on. His band had been cut from the movie, and local musicians replaced them. The Jordanaires, his close friends, were replaced by the Ken Darby Trio. Elvis called it political bullshit. Suddenly, he got a silly look. "I wish I had a magic potion to turn me into the Invisible Man. If I were invisible, I could go anywhere and never worry about anything," he laughed. "I wish you could be invisible for a while, just to see how people behave when you're not around. Not so much the boys, but the girls. Something about you drives them crazy," I said. We were enjoying the stars when a passing tugboat blasted its horn. "Was that you, baby? Are you sitting on a frog?" He laughed, holding his nose. I laughed too, trying to hide my embarrassment, until the horn sounded again and I blamed it on him. "Boy, you should hear my cousin Gene. For a little guy, he sure makes a loud one," he said, laughing hysterically. "Speaking of the guys, where are they and how are they?" I asked. They were usually with him, but I had only seen red. "The CBs. They're probably out chasing girls," he said. I remembered a classmate nicknamed CB because he was always trying to get girls, so I asked Elvis if I was right. "You're sharp, June, really sharp," he answered. We had been parked on Mud Island for hours. I was falling asleep on Elvis's shoulder when he started talking about his new friend, Nick Adams. Nick was coming to Memphis for a visit. "You'll like him, June. He's a real funny little guy. He had a bit part in Rebel Without a Cause, and is writing a book on James Dean's life." We didn't know it at the time, but Nick had been hired by Colonel Parker to spy on Elvis. Nick was paid to report back to the Colonel, but Elvis thought Nick was just a struggling actor and a true friend. Elvis admired James Dean a lot. He knew what it was like to have a hard time, and he related to Nick because of their admiration for Dean. Elvis wasn't as shy as people thought. His slight stutter was because he lacked confidence in conversations. He never stuttered when he was with me. It was close to 4 a.m. when we left Mud Island. While putting the top up on the car, I found the bag of cookies, now cold and crispy, on the back seat. We drove past a milk truck making home deliveries. Elvis made a U-turn and parked behind the truck. When the delivery man came back, Elvis asked if he could buy a quart of milk. He reached into his pocket but found no money. The milkman recognized Elvis and asked for an autograph on an IOU, which he gladly gave. On the way home, we drank the cold milk from the bottle, sharing a milk mustache. Elvis wiped the milk from his upper lip with the back of his hand, just like James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause. I had to do the same. We didn't have napkins. When I was a little boy, I used to go to the store for a quart of milk, and before I got home, all the cream was gone from the top. "Did you ever do that?" he asked. Boy, that brings back memories. I remember peeling back that little cardboard stopper and sucking all the cream too. I'd probably do it today if I could find some unhomogenized milk. Wouldn't you? I asked, licking my lips. I don't know who came up with the idea of homogenized milk, but they sure took all the fun out of it. Elvis laughed. He raised the bottle to his lips, drank his fill, and handed the rest to me. Only a tiny bit was left, and I had to tilt my head back to get it, making milk spill down my chin. Elvis placed his hand under my chin to catch the dripping milk, then kissed away the rest, laughing between licks. Daylight was breaking when we pulled into the driveway. We tiptoed into the house, and Lovey was waiting with her head sticking out of her partially opened bedroom door. "Is that you, Elvis? It's about time you lovebirds were getting home. I've been worried," she whispered. "We're okay, Mama. Go back to sleep," he said softly, walking to the end of the hall and kissing her cheek. After only a few hours of sleep, I woke to the smell of fresh coffee. I joined Lovey at the kitchen table. She wasn't happy about our late night, but after hearing about the milkman, she was back to her usual self. Mr. Presley came in with 3 large bags of groceries. Lovey started putting them away. "Go read your paper, Vernon. I'll take care of this," she told him. "I don't know why I let him go to the store, June. He knows whole chickens cost less, but look what he gets," she said, showing me the 2 trays of cut-up fryers. "Are we having fried chicken tonight?" I asked, thinking I might start clucking. "It depends on what Elvis is in the mood for," she answered. I volunteered to clean the chicken and was at the sink when Elvis walked up behind me and put his arms around my waist. "Get away. June is washing chicken," Lovey screamed. Elvis backed off, let out a disgusted yuck, and left the room. "What was that all about?" I asked. "Elvis is funny like that, June. He won't eat chicken if he sees it before it's cooked," Lovey replied. I finished cleaning the chicken and put it in the refrigerator. I found Elvis in the den, reading the morning paper. "What are you doing in here? I thought you liked to read in bed," I asked. "I do, but someone's sleeping in my bed, and it's not Little Red Riding Hood," he said. I had forgotten about Pat, who had been sleeping for hours. I started teasing Elvis about the raw chicken and his weak stomach. "It's not a weak stomach, June. It's bad memories. Did you ever have to kill and pluck a chicken?" he asked. "I never killed one, but I helped my mother pluck one." "How could you stand that smell? When you stick that dead chicken down in boiling water, and the steam hits you in the face, yuck. That's the most disgusting smell in the world. I didn't mind chasing them around the backyard, even cutting off their heads, but that smell was unbearable. Did you wash your hands with soap? He asked, taking my hands and putting them to his nose. My stomach started to feel queasy. Are we having fried chicken again? We had it a few nights ago. I like it, but not every other day, Elvis said, screwing up his nose. How about I fix the chicken tonight? I suggested. He took my hand and led me to the kitchen. Mama, June's gonna fix the chicken tonight, he announced. Good, how you gonna fix it? Lovey asked, smothered with brown gravy if that's okay. Sounds good to me, we all like chicken any way it's fixed. Anything special you need? You probably have everything I need. Do you have any boulin cubes? Maybe some green onions, celery, and parsley, I added. What the hell is a boulin cube? Elvis asked. It's a little cube you mix with water. It tastes like chicken broth and gives the gravy a good flavor. We have fryers, so I'll use boulin cubes. Does that answer your question? I asked, seeing the confused look on his face. Your answer was so long, June, I forgot the question. Sounds like a bunch of bull onion to me. Everyone enjoyed supper that night, especially Lovey, who said it was a nice change from mashed potatoes. You can do the cooking anytime you want, she told me. The next day, after a huge breakfast, Elvis pulled out a large box filled with gasoline-powered toys. Cars, trucks, airplanes, and race cars. When he thought the neighborhood was awake, we went outside and raced the noisy little vehicles up the driveway, always starting at the front gate, so they would slow down on the grass. Elvis used a pull rope to start the engine. Pat and I were no help afraid the propellers might cut off our fingers. Elvis had us running around. He did the racing, we did the chasing. After several trips into the house for ice water, Lovey made us a pitcher of lemonade to keep outside. We played with the little vehicles until a crowd gathered at the front gate. Elvis was pacing, keeping an eye on the crowd. When it thinned out, he jumped in the car and said, I'll be right back. An hour later, he returned in a pickup truck with a male passenger in the front and a Hammond organ in the back. Where do we put this, Mama? He asked, grinning like a little boy. They moved the furniture in the den to make room for the organ. Elvis sat and experimented with every sound for hours. Elvis's organ playing was briefly interrupted by a phone call from Nick Adams. Nick was at the Memphis airport, expecting Elvis to pick him up. Okay, man, we're kind of tied up right now, so jump in a taxi and I'll have someone looking out for you at the front gate. He told Nick, then went to the side door to inform his security guard, Bitsy Mott. I recognized Bitsy from the Florida tour, where he hung out in the theater lobbies, selling Elvis pictures and programs. It wasn't until later that I learned Bitsy was the Colonel's brother-in-law and a paid informer. One night I offered to take a hot cup of coffee out to Bitsy because Lovey was busy in the kitchen. Thanks, June. It is June, isn't it? From Biloxi, right? Bitsy said, straightening his facts before reporting back to the Colonel. Nick arrived, wearing sunglasses even though the sun was setting, looking like Mr. Hollywood with his California tan. Despite his elevator shoes, Nick and I were eye to eye. He appeared much older than Elvis because of his receding hairline, but he acted young. He was constantly cracking jokes in the voices of Mr. Magoo, Walter Brennan, and even Sylvester the Cat. His more serious impressions were John Wayne and Marlon Brando. Nick kept us laughing and fit right in. Whenever Elvis was home for a reasonable amount of time, he would visit the local children's hospital, signing autographs and visiting seriously ill children, even though it could be depressing, gave Elvis enormous gratification. Elvis and Nick left for the hospital, and a crowd of fans followed them out the gate. Once they were gone, Pat and I decided to have a little fun with the toy cars. I picked the little red racer, Elvis's favorite, and got it started. It was loud and a bit scary, so I quickly put it down on the driveway, about 10 feet from the iron gate. In my excitement, I didn't realize I had it pointing the wrong way. The car roared off like a bolt of lightning and crashed, wedging itself halfway under the iron gate. Little pieces of red plastic were scattered everywhere. Panicked, we took all the vehicles out of the box and put what was left of the little red racer at the bottom. I didn't know how I was going to explain this to Elvis, but I knew he would find out. The red racer was not only the fastest, but also his favorite. When Elvis and Nick returned from the hospital, Elvis immediately got out the box of toys and took them to the front gate. He pulled them out one by one, showing them to Nick. When he saw the little red racer, or what was left of it, in the bottom of the box, he looked at Pat and then at me. I tried to keep a straight face, but the guilt was obvious. "Okay, June, you wanna tell me how it happened?" he asked. I couldn't keep a straight face, and burst out laughing. I couldn't tell the front from the back, and when I let it go, I expected it to go up the driveway, but it didn't. It went the other way. It almost fit under the gate. Almost. I'm sorry, I really am. I didn't mean to hurt it, and I don't know why I laughed, I said, still trying to control my nervous laughter. "It's okay, baby, it was only my favorite," he said, picking up the smashed little racer, hugging it against his chest, and pretending to cry. Elvis liked being in charge. During a deep-sea fishing trip, he took a look around the captain's cabin. He caught the most fish, but he had the best bait, with Red West at his side. Back at the house, I once looked over Elvis's shoulder while he inspected his first gold record, which had arrived that day. We tried to escape to be alone as much as possible. Every moment with Elvis was special. One evening, Elvis got a phone call from Dewey Phillips. The four of us, Nick, Pat, Elvis, and I, headed for Dewey's house. Elvis was so eager to get there that I thought the black limo must have been fixed. When we walked in, I saw a projector and screen set up in the den. Elvis introduced everyone and told Pat and me to stay in the living room with Mrs. Phillips and the children. He and Nick went into the den with Dewey and a few other men. Pat and I watched the children play, making small talk with Mrs. Phillips. We waited for what seemed like forever. Finally, one of the men came out of the room, and I could see nude bodies on the screen when the door opened. I felt angry, not embarrassed. I sat quietly, hoping it would be over soon. My neck ached from gritting my teeth, and my hands were marked from clenching my fists. I'd had enough. I went to the door, knocked a few times, and opened it wide. All heads turned in my direction. Elvis jumped out of his chair and stood in front of me. "What the hell are you doing, June? I don't want you watching this shit," he said, taking me by the arm and closing the door behind us. "You can watch that shit as long as you want, Elvis. But first you can take me and Pat home," I demanded. "Okay, baby, I was ready to leave anyway. Let me go get Nick. Don't be long." He knew I was mad, and started apologizing as soon as we got in the car. "I'm sorry, baby. Dewey said he had something he wanted me to see. I didn't know it was skin flicks," he said softly, not wanting Nick, who was in the backseat, to hear. "You can go back if you want to. I just don't want to be in the same house," I replied, not caring who heard. "You tell him, June. Shame on you, Elvis, embarrassing all of us like that," Nick said, laughing like it was all a big joke. Pat, who hadn't seen the screen, joined in laughing with Nick. "If y'all are trying to make me out to be a stick in the mud, then y'all can kiss my ass," I said, now laughing too. Elvis cooed and gooed, pulling me next to him, changing the subject. The incident was never mentioned again. When we got back to the house, Elvis and Nick visited with the fans lined up along the fence. Pat and I visited with some of the girls. They were at the gate every afternoon after school, and their faces had become familiar to us. Elvis knew all the regulars and called them by name. Inside, we watched a horror movie on television, but Nick stayed at the fence, talking to the girls. He was probably trying to pick up a few fans of his own. Elvis left the side door open for Nick and instructed Bitsy to remind him to lock up. Elvis slept in the bed with me and Pat, leaving the guest room light on for Nick. The next morning we were having breakfast when Nick came in, still half asleep but hungry. Elvis teased him about flirting with the girls all night and not getting enough sleep. When Lovey got up to fix Nick some scrambled eggs, Elvis got upset. "Sit down, Mama, and finish your breakfast. If Nick wants eggs, he can fix his own. If you went to bed at night and left the girls alone, you'd be here in time to eat," he said, addressing Nick. "Do you ever think of anything but girls?" "I've got other things on my mind too, Elvis. Will you please pass the biscuits?" Nick said calmly. Lovey was the first to laugh. You had to admire the way Nick's charm and wit got him out of an uncomfortable situation. Alberta was running the vacuum cleaner, so we all went into Elvis's bedroom to get out of her way. Lovey came in to find Nick, and ask him to unpack his things. Nick had 2 large suitcases and an overnight bag lying wide open in the middle of the floor. It looked like he was planning to stay a while. "Alberta wants to clean the guest room, Nick. Would you mind unpacking all your things and putting them away? I'd do it for you, but I don't like meddling in other people's things. There's plenty of room in the closet, and lots of drawer space," she said sweetly, thanking him and leaving the room. "That boy sure is messy," she said to me the next time we were alone. Nick didn't seem to mind the mess at all. He got up from his sprawled position in the middle of Elvis's bed and went in to unpack. He returned about 10 minutes later, holding a dress. "I almost forgot. Natalie sent you a souvenir, Elvis," Nick said, prancing around the room, holding the dress up to his shoulders. I recognized the dress from a recent photograph of Natalie Wood in a movie magazine. It was a tight-fitting white, black, and red floral print, with a split-up one side, slightly oriental. Just my style, but definitely not my size. Nick announced that the dress had been made by Natalie's personal dressmaker, the same one who made the blue velvet shirt Elvis wore at the Mississippi-Alabama State Fair. Being a seamstress, I turned the dress inside out and inspected the workmanship. It was definitely well made. The dress didn't have a label, and I guessed it to be a size 1, no larger than a 3. "You should see her in this dress, June. Boy oh boy does she fill it out," Nick said, taking the dress from me. "I know, Nick. I saw a picture of her in that same dress, and it fit her like a glove. She looked great," I replied. Pushing Elvis's clothes to either side, Nick found a hanger and placed the dress in the center of Elvis's closet. Nick was trying to make me jealous, and I couldn't understand why. I refused to let him get to me, and went along with everything he said. I was secure enough in my relationship with Elvis that I didn't consider Natalie a threat. She was cute enough, but then I wasn't what you'd call chopped liver. Elvis winked at me for being a good sport. Later, when Elvis and I were alone, I asked him what Nick was trying to prove. "I don't think Nick likes me," I said. "I wish you would have invited him to come visit some other time, when I wasn't here." "I didn't invite him, June. He more or less invited himself. He's okay, baby. He's just a lonesome little guy struggling to make it in Hollywood. Keep being nice to him, June. He needs friends," Elvis added, showing his tender side. He always felt sorry for the underdog. Nick was hard to figure out. Around Elvis, he was lighthearted and funny. But when Elvis wasn't around, he was very serious with me, constantly asking me personal questions, sometimes downright nosy. He knew things about me he could only have heard from Elvis, who wasn't much of a talker when it came to his personal life. I figured he must have been pumping Elvis for information as well. "Just how serious is it between you and Elvis, June? Do you two plan to get married anytime soon or what?" he asked. "Nick, I know you're supposed to be writing a book about James Dean. Are you thinking of writing one about me too?" I answered, politely evading his questions. "If you want to know anything about Elvis and me, I suggest you ask Elvis. If I didn't know better, I'd swear you were a reporter," I said, laughing him off. Nick would laugh too, but he would keep on asking. "I'm just a curious guy, June. I like people and I like to know everything there is to know about them. I'd just like to get to know you better, that's all," he said softly, trying to make his remarks seem flattering. Nick even asked Pat if Elvis and I were sleeping together. She told him it was none of her business and none of his business either, stopping him dead in his tracks. When I complained to Elvis about Nick's constant badgering, he told me not to pay him any attention. "He don't mean anything by it, June. That's just the way he is. He's always asking me questions too. Sometimes I answer, and sometimes I tell him to shut his mouth before he drives me crazy enough to shut it for him." Nick was like Elvis's shadow. If we wanted to spend some time alone, Elvis had to tell Nick to go find something to do, usually suggesting he do a little PR at the front gate. Nick loved being the big shot and signing autographs even though they were all Elvis fans. One day, Nick requested fried chicken for dinner. That night in the dining room, Elvis pulled out a chair for his mother, flapped his arms, and whispered, "Cluck, cluck," in her ear. Everyone was in a good mood, and halfway through the meal, Nick started telling a joke. When he accidentally used the word fuck in front of Mr. and Mrs. Presley, Elvis leaned across the table and slapped him across the top of his head. "Nick, you'd better shove some of those mashed potatoes in your mouth before I do," Elvis warned. Even with the California suntan, we could see Nick's face turning red. He lowered his head, eating all the mashed potatoes without coming up for air. He then apologized to everyone for the slip of the tongue. "May I have some more potatoes, Mrs. Presley?" "Why, Nick, are you getting ready to say it again?" Lovey responded, putting Nick at ease and making everyone laugh. Elvis had given Pat and me his master bedroom, so we were also using the master bath. One morning, while brushing my teeth, I noticed a glass of water with something soaking in it. Looking through the side of the glass, I thought they were false teeth, but when I looked down, the teeth seemed to disappear. I learned later that the curved, thin strip of teeth belonged to Nick. They were his Hollywood smile. Nick gave us a demonstration by slipping the strip over his natural teeth and smiling like the Cheshire Cat. The teeth were a definite improvement over Nick's not-so-bright smile. Elvis then announced that he too had some Hollywood teeth. I didn't believe him until he pulled 2 tiny teeth from his mouth. He used the Cosmetic caps whenever he was in front of the camera. Smiling with and without the teeth, he showed me the difference, which I thought was negligible. Elvis had a pretty smile without them. His 2 natural teeth next to his front teeth were a tiny bit smaller than they should have been. At least that's what the Hollywood experts thought. The caps evened them out. However, he had one major problem with his caps: he couldn't eat with them, and Elvis was always snacking on something. He had several sets made, but they were always getting lost or broken. He would remove the teeth, put them in his shirt pocket, and forget about them. Every time Alberta did the laundry, the teeth were either broken or went down the drain. He was losing on average a pair a day. One afternoon, we put on a pair of boxing gloves and used the empty swimming pool as our ring. Showing a little mercy, he only used his left hand. I connected with a good left hook, right to his mouth, and he immediately called for a timeout. He removed his cosmetic caps and carefully placed them on the top rung of the pool ladder. Pat came out to watch the boxing match and decided a safe place to sit was between the handrails of the ladder. She stepped on one of the caps, crushing it like an eggshell, and knocked the other one in the pool. Like Humpty Dumpty, it didn't survive the long fall. The day had just begun, and already he'd lost 4 teeth. His average was improving. Growing up with a brother who had been a Golden Gloves boxing champion, this wasn't the first time I had engaged in the sport of pugilism, and I was pretty adept, defensively as well as offensively. My brother had a speed bag, a small punching bag mounted in our backyard, and I could literally make it sing. The last few days in Memphis were a whirlwind of activity. Reporters and photographers swarmed around, all eager to get a piece of Elvis. Even a representative from RCA was there to present him with a gold record for Love Me Tender. It was like a real circus, but Elvis handled it all with grace. He had no choice. This was part of the life he had chosen. Despite the chaos, Elvis and I managed to find moments of peace. One afternoon, he surprised me with a gift, a tiny lavender rhinestone radio. It was the exact one I had admired in a record shop, but I couldn't afford. When I opened it, I was over the moon. I ran to show Lovey, who was already beaming with pride. She had wrapped it herself. We turned it on, and it just so happened to be playing Hound Dog. I dragged Elvis out to the hallway to listen, and for a moment it was just us, the music, and the little radio. But the calm moments were rare. Nick was still around, and his antics were starting to wear on me. He seemed to have a problem with me, and I couldn't quite figure out why. I tried to ignore his underhanded stunts, but it was hard. Elvis, however, asked me to be nice to Nick, and I tried my best to do that, even when it felt like the last thing I wanted to do. The night before Elvis was set to leave for New York, we all went to a private screening of Love Me Tender. The film was short, but it was significant for Elvis. He was critical of his performance, but Lovey and I assured him he did a great job. Nick tried to cheer him up, saying things like, "You've proven yourself as an actor, don't worry about it." Elvis seemed to take it as a compliment, but I could sense a hint of jealousy in Nick's voice. The next morning, I made my reservations to fly home, but Elvis canceled them, insisting I go with him to New York. I was hesitant. The idea of a big city like New York scared me. I was a small town girl, and I had already made plans to stay in Memphis for 10 days. Besides, I didn't have enough warm clothes for the trip. Elvis didn't take my refusal well, and we ended up having a fight. Lovey noticed the tension between us and tried to help, but it was hard to talk about everything that was bothering me. That night, I was emotionally drained and went to Elvis's room to take a nap. When I woke up, Elvis was there and we talked things out. He promised to call Nick and tell him not to invite Natalie. We made up, and Lovey was overjoyed to see us back to our usual selves. The last 2 days were a blur of photo sessions and interviews. Colonel Parker had arranged everything, and it was intense. But through it all, Elvis and I managed to stay strong. We held hands, shared a few laughs, and tried to make the most of our time together. When it was time for Elvis to leave, I watched him go with a heavy heart. I knew things would be different without him, but I also knew that our love was strong enough to get through anything. As he drove away, I promised myself that no matter what, I would always be there for him, just like he was there for me. And as I stood there, watching the pink car disappear into the distance, I felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. Everything would be okay.